Welcome back to Tabletop Assault. I'm Ross and today I'm going to give you my first impressions of the Thousand Suns new codex. So I will go into fairly big detail on this, though I am going to give you sort of my idea on the most amazing loadouts and combinations in this, basically because we'll probably find this out a week or two after release when people have playtested it in much thorough detail. But I will give you a huge amount of the information within the codex. I'll give you my impressions and what I think will work out so far. We have divided this up so that you can easily identify areas you might be interested in. For instance, if you're more interested in the stratagems, or you prefer to see data sheets or relics, etc., you should be able to skip onto that fairly easily. I will do a summary at the beginning, which you can skip if you want, but this is mainly for people who just want to really dive straight in, just see like, give me a TLDR. This gives it very limited on a couple of key questions in that one, but you will get the most out of it if you watch the whole video, obviously. But if you just want to watch a wee summary, that's at the start. Speaking of which, let's go into that. So as a summary, I'm going to start off with the bad stuff. The range is still relatively small. This is kind of a given. Access to more units from the Chaos range would have been incredibly useful for Thousand Suns. Things like Obliterators, etc. would have been just handy. But ultimately, you know, in their areas that they struggle, maybe in a bit of long range and anti-vehicle, monster, etc. Ultimately, Thousand Suns need a bit more of possibly the Death Guard treatment rather than just putting stuff in from the Chaos Space Marine Codex in general. Yeah, they have access to things like Maulerfiend and the Forgefiend, but they don't feel very Thousand Suns. I mean, that's why they don't appear in the Death Guard Codex. So a lot of it's down to, yeah, they need a bit more in their module range, but it is what it is. I don't think we were going to see that because other forces are getting expanded on at the moment, such as Adeptus Sororitas at the start of the year, and now Orcs. Magnus is not Toughness 8 and cannot, as far as I can see, be made Invul 3 anymore. Invul 3 meaning he is ignoring 2/3 of the attacks that come onto him when he does buff up. That ain't possible anymore. Makes him a little bit more vulnerable than I'd like, and just not having Toughness 8, I think a Demon Primarch of the points you spend, etc., should have made him Toughness 8. He does, however, have, if he's a Warlord, -1 damage, which will increase his survivability, and he is still a powerhouse. Plenty of attacks, many psychic abilities. If he's a Warlord, he actually knows all the psychic abilities that are available to him, which gives you a massive amount of options to choose from. But his durability, I think people were hoping for that extra Toughness 8 would have really helped. Maybe is in a bit of question. If you manage to get first turn and you've got the weaponry, you can certainly snipe him out fairly easily. But still powerful, still plenty of ways to buff him up, and he is a psychic powerhouse. Smite still increases per cast, as far as I can see. I didn't see anything that could stop it, like it was the case, I think, later on in 8th edition. However, Rubric Squads and Scarab Occult, they now cast Smite normally, so although it may be harder to cast per round, Smite now does work, you know, with Rubrics and Scarabs. So there is, you know, if you've got plenty of multiple small squads, sure it's going to be harder to cast it later on, but you can maybe just attempt to do a lot more Smites. The good stuff, there's a lot of ways to cause mortal wounds, many ways. Psychic abilities, etc., stratagems, whatever. Psychic abilities in general are actually pretty good. I think they're a little bit more focused this time round. Relics have been improved. No must takes I can see yet. Nothing that screamed at me. Maybe I'll have a second round look at them at some point. But still I can see a lot of potential for a lot of them, which is good. I wasn't too impressed with some of the relics in 8th edition. Some of them felt very weak. I'm now seeing in 9th edition a lot more focus on relics, and I can see lots of options for different ones. So fairly on that side I am impressed. Warp Flame weapons are now 12 inches. The additional buffs as well, I think the maximum you can make it strength 6 after a whole bunch of shenanigans to make it a bit stronger. Add on the new version of Vets. It's basically Vets but 2 command points and reworded as something else. This can be very deadly, but expensive. So there is plenty of potential for Warp Flame weapons that I can see in the future. Plenty of deployment options through stratagems, etc., but still, rubrics were very slow. I know you could come in from like Tactical Reserve and other ways. This just gives you more options on top of that. Overall, Thousand Suns issues were their limited range and toolkit. The updated codex, very nice. I think it has covered a lot of weaknesses, but I think we're not going to really see the true strength of Thousand Suns until they get a bit more unique units to them. Sure, it's nice to have the new character, but I think there should have been a little bit more. In terms of units that I can see that are going to be pretty good, possibly Scarab Occults. Now this is or even Rubrics with full Warp Flamers. Plenty of ways to buff up Warp Flamers. I think they hinted they could get to strength 5. I think there's a way to make them strength 6. And, you know, with the ability to get +1 to your wound rolls, very, very nice. That's going to damage a lot of things. 12 inches means that there's abilities to come in and deploy within 9 inches of your opponent and just flame away. If they attempt to charge, you can overwatch. Scarab Occult can be good in terms of just having those loads of wounds. They put out loads of Infernal bolter shots. That can be really damaging to your opponent. So yeah, I can see Rubric Marines and Scarab Occult. Maybe you would take a big unit of them and that would be like a major damage dealing unit, but you'd equally have to have plenty of buffs on them to get the full amount of them, and each one that dies is going to be costly. So that's kind of my summary, TLDR, what we've got there. Next I'm going to have a look at like sort of the detachment abilities, speak a bit more on them. Detachment abilities and data sheet abilities. This is kind of like your army based rules. So Thousand Sons detachments gain mere servants, cannot include more cultist units or Bray units than there are Rubric or Scarab Occult units. Example given is 2 Rubrics and 1 Scarab, means that there can't be more than 3 cultist units and or 3 Bray units. So we sort of saw this in Death Guard already. If you have 3 of the Rubrics and Scarabs, you can have 3 cultists and you can have 3 Bray. Really just your kind of choice on what you would prefer on that side. This is really to try and limit people from having full cultist units or whatever cheapest unit there is. Now, some people look at punishment. I kind of like it that they are saying, look, you need to have more of the actual Thousand Sons or the Rubrics in your army. But yeah, some people don't like this in some way, but I think it's not bad. Thousand Sons detachments gain Jealous Tyrant, max 1 Demon Prince in each Thousand Sons detachment. Again, we saw this in Death Guard. They've worded it better than Death Guard 1, which is great. So very, very good on that side. All Thousand Sons units gain Brotherhood of the Sorcerer. So this is like your Legion trait, and this gives +1 to your Psychic tests, and Arcana Astartes / Tzaangors gain 5+ invul. Very, very nice to have +1 to your Psychic test. It's going to make a lot more casting very, very easy. Keep in mind, I believe with Magnus's rules, which we will get to very later on, this does apply as well. As far as I can tell, as he should be part of a Brotherhood of the Sorcerers, as his detachment would be Thousand Son, but correct me if I'm wrong on that one. And then the 5+ invul was sort of baked into data sheets already, now is not. But we still, many of the units do get it. Rubric Marines, Scarab Occult Terminators and Bray units gain Obsec. A bit of a surprise by Scarab Occult getting Obsec, but fair enough. Just, you know, your standard Obsec. The Great Cult keyword. Each detachment that includes Great Cult units must nominate one of the 9 cult it would like to be. You cannot include multiple cults in one detachment. Ahriman does not interfere with this because he's kind of, you know, freelancing as well. So the Great Cult is similar to Death Guard, where we had our sort of, I know the Plague sort of units you got in that one. The Great Cults each have certain things on them. They have a Psychic Power, a Warlord Trait, and a Sorcerer's Arcana, a Relic in them for each one that you choose. But again, you can only choose one for the detachment. Hateful Assault is gone, no surprise there. Malicious Volley and Teleport Strike remain. Hateful Assault being gone, I mean, we're now seeing the 2 attacks kind of baked into the datasheet. I'm very, very intrigued that they're not, when we get a Chaos Space Marine Codex this edition, whether general Chaos Space Marines are going to be 1 attack or 2. I'm thinking they're going to be 2, but maybe they're treating Rubric Marines, Plague Marines, Corps Berserkers, etc. as their sort of Primaris equivalent, give them 2 attacks. I'm very, very intrigued. I hope that Chaos Space Marines do just get 2 attacks. That would be very, very useful. Either way, we saw this in Death Guard 1 that Hateful Assault was gone, so fair enough. Sorcerer's Masters measure Psychic test or deny tests from Rubric Marines and Scarab Occult units from their Spang Champion and Scarab Occult Sorcerer model. This is giving a bit more clarity on that one. Simply put, that if that unit is going to cast anything, it needs to be from the unit champion. And I think that is fair to have. So very, very nice just to get a bit more clarity there. Cabbalistic Rituals are your ability for Thousand Sons if you go more or less a whole Thousand Sons army. So if every unit in your army has Thousand Sons keyword bar unaligned, you gain Cabal of Sorcerers. At the start of the psychic phase, you gain points which you can spend on abilities. Spend points during your psychic phase, so keep in mind this is only in your psychic phase, you don't get them both yours and your opponent's. Any left, however, do not carry over to following psychic phase. Unless specified, each ritual can only be used once per psychic phase, and you can only benefit from one ritual per psychic phase. There is ways around this. I believe Magnus's Warlord Trait does get you around it. I'll need to double check on that one, but yeah, I think he can benefit from 2. Magnus generates 4 points. Ahriman, Exalted Sorcerer and Demon Prince generate 3. Sorcerer, Sorcerer and Terminator Armour, Infernal Master generate 2. And your Scarab, Occult, Sorcerer, Aspiring Sorcerer and Tzaangors Shaman generate 1. So yeah, you basically build up these points from the units that you have on the board, and then you can spend them on these various abilities. Reminds me very much of Blood Tithes for basically the Corn Armour you used to have, Demonkin. It kind of reminds me they had Blood Tithes, you generate points from things you kill. This is kind of similar to that, though less as devastating as that used to be. I will now list you sort of the main ones that I see that are quite useful. So Malevolent Charge is 4 points. If you have a psychic ability that causes mortal wounds, you can inflict a further d3 to one of the units affected. Kindred Sorcerer, 5 points. After psychic test, add 1 to the test. Handy for a better smite result. So if you maybe caused, you only got 1 off the result you wanted, add 1, very, very helpful. I wonder if you cast an 11 or something, you wanted to push on to 12, more or less make it impossible for your opponent, or even 12 to 13. Don't know if that's possible, but make it so that your opponent can't actually deny you. There's an ability that does mean you can't deny, but an interesting one, and nice to have that +1 handy if you do require it. Warp Sight, which is 3 points. When psychic power is manifested that requires visibility, you can target any unit visible to a friendly one. It's cheap, it's not bad. I mean, line of sight blockers do apply. It's okay. Echoes from the Warp, 4 points. Select one friendly psyker. You can perform Psychic Action Warp Charge 3, which if successful gives you command point. Very handy for command points. Pact from Beyond, 7 points. Used when casting a spell. Do not make a test. It auto casts at minimum required warp charge value. If your opponent has no denies left or never even had a deny, this will just be more or less an auto cast. So very, very handy to have. I really like that one. Cabbalistic Focus, 8 points. Psychic power cannot be denied. Again, very, very useful. Get off your power, and if it's absolutely essential it goes off, stop your opponent from having any options. Psychic Maelstrom, 8 points. Units can perform a Witchfire psychic ability that has been used before, even if they do not know the spell. Interesting, it says you do not know the spell, but again, mortal wound abilities, just plenty of them. Get another one off. Wrath of the Immaterium, 9 points. Add 2 to psychic test, which is very, very nice. Overall, these are fine. Best are sort of stopping the deny and the auto casts and gaining command points. All very, very useful abilities. Though, of course, they do cost a lot of points. I can't see you using more, I can see more or less people using the high value ones. And then you're not going to get more than maybe 2 abilities off at a time. Because if you use the 2 main ones, which are like 8 points, etc., you're going to be looking at 15 to 16 to actually work these off. So they're not bad, yeah, pretty good overall, nice to have and give you a little bit more, assurance when using your psychic abilities in your psychic phase. Legion Command is your abilities to upgrade characters within your force, and we're now beginning to see this pretty predominantly in every codex. We see various characters or models get upgrades, but I really like the ones for the Thousand Suns because it's not just really one model or 2 model that get the chance to be upgraded, but it's a series of different models with different roles. So you have your Exalted Sorcerer ones, you have your Sorcerers and Terminator Armour, and then you have your Aspiring Sorcerers or your Scarab Occult ones. So it's not just all HQ or something, it's actually ones in various levels. Having the Aspiring Sorcerer and Scarab Occult one is very useful. So I'm going to quickly go over them. So your Exalted Sorcerer ones, we have Ratai, which is 25 points. Model can attempt to manifest one's additional psychic power. It's going to be basically if you cast all your powers and smite, etc. Paradigm of Change, 15 points. Add 1 to wound and attack characteristics. I mean, fine. Dilettante, now this one's fun. 35 points. Models can receive an additional Sorcerer Arcana relic. Must be a relic they can have. Cannot be one already used, but can be done even if the model has a relic already. Now, the Thousand Suns relics are pretty good. I don't know if there's any completely devastating combinations you can do here, but maybe there is. However, in some other codexes this would have been absolutely bonkers, but this one's only in the Exalted Sorcerer. For the Sorcerers and Terminator armour, there is Loyal Thrall, which is 15 points. Model can perform a psychic action in exchange for one psychic ability, as opposed to all their psychic abilities. Witch Warrior, which is 15 points, reroll dice when calculating mortal wounds caused by Witchfire and Smite. And Battle Psyker, which is 10 points, weapon skill, ballistic skill become 2+, and attack characteristic becomes 5. Honestly, this one's a bit of a difficult one because I'm not that impressed with Sorcerers and Terminator armour. I think they were a little bit of a wasted opportunity in terms of what they could have done with their datasheet. Onto the Aspiring Sorcerers and Scarab Occult Sorcerer ones, we have Ardent Automata, which is 20 points. Model's unit can perform an action and shoot. I really like this one because I've learned the value of Necrons being able to try and get action off and still being able to maintain firepower. So I really like that one because you might end up having larger units now of Rubrics and Scarabs. If you're going to have one big bulky unit of them, then yeah, this one's going to be pretty good. Protege, which is 10 points, model knows an additional psychic ability. Might be good, again, on a big bulk of Scarab Occult that you want to get a lot of buffs onto them. I don't know, I mean, your Thousand Suns, there's going to be plenty of psychic abilities flying around the place. Rites of Coalescence, 15 points, in command phase, another model in the unit regains all its wounds. I think that's going to be more useful in Scarab Occult. Say someone brought one of your models down to 1 wound, it's going to go back up to 3. So that's going to be really, really handy just to keep it going. Not in essence the best, but still not bad. So the ones of note are Dilettante. I think that extra relic thing is going to be a lot of fun. I'm interested to see if people can work out any combos there. Witch Warrior, Sorcerer can become a lot more reliable at throwing out mortal wounds. Just a shame that I'm not really that sold on Sorcerers. But if you've got one, or just like Sorcerer and Terminator armour. But if you've got one, having more mortal wounds is always handy. Ardent Automata, I think, is probably my favourite one for the Aspiring Sorcerers and the Scarab Occult. Simply put, you can get an objective, perform an action on it, and maintain all your range, especially if you deep strike in. So, I really quite like that. Rites of Coalescence regains wounds in Scarab Occult. Again, quite nice, but I'm sort of more sold on the Ardent Automata because I like to do actions on my objective markers. So that, to me, sort of stands out a little bit more. Coming to the cults of the Legion, they are kind of like your plague companies, similar to the Death Guard section. Each attachment, that is Thousand Suns, is a great cult and gains access to their abilities. All Psychers in the detachment gain access to the extra psychic ability in addition to any they already know, which is very, very nice. Also, Warlords can take the relevant Warlord Traits, and Relics can be taken. If Magnus is your Warlords, then any detachment that is a great cult can choose from their sort of great cult relic, but if your Warlord is part of a great cult, the only relic you can choose from is the one from their great cult. So let's go through these one by one. As far as I know, Magnus also doesn't get one of these abilities like Mortarion. Mortarion does get one. Magnus just gets his Warlord Traits, and there are 3 of them. So Cult Mutation, Psychic Power, Warp Reality, Malediction, Warp Charge 6. Select a terrain piece within 24 inches of the caster, then an enemy unit within 3 inches of that terrain piece. Half the movement and -1 advance and charge moves to the unit. Warlord trait is Touch of Vicissitude. Melee attacks made by Warlord on unmodified hit roll of 6 inflict 1 mortal wound in addition to any damage. And Relic, Exalted Mutation, Sorcerer model only, +1 strength, toughness and attack. That Sorcerer one, I would love that would apply to Demon Princes, but tragically it does not. It is just Sorcerer and Sorcerer and Terminator armour as far as I can see. Possibly the Infernal Master, no it isn't, it is just literally the Sorcerers. So there was potential on that one there. Call of Prophecy, Psychic Power, Divine the Future, Blessing, Warp Charge 6. Roll d6 and use that result later on in a single hit, wound, advance, charge, psychic, deny, morale, basically replace 1 dice. I really like that, always a very helpful psychic ability to have. Warlord trait, guided by what, in fact I really wish that was a generic one because it'd be really good, but it kind of makes sense for the prophecy. Warlord trait, guided by whispers, once per game. When Warlord is charged, they can move 6 inches after Overwatch Very, very handy to get your Warlord out of dodge. So really, really handy in a protection scale. Relic is Orokai Brazier. In command phase, select one cult unit within 6 inches of the bearer. Each time that unit attacks, reroll 1 hit, wound or damage roll. Overall, a very good one. I like the psychic ability, very useful, and the relic I think is very useful as a buff one as well. It may only be one cult unit, but you're still probably going to get some use out of that hit, wound and damage one. So yeah, really good. Cult of Time, psychic power is Time Flux. It's a blessing with Warp Charge 6. Select a friendly infantry unit within 6 inches, return 1 destroyed model to the unit. I think probably your most obvious targets are your Scarab Occult for that, as they are the unit that you can return models to and get the most points back. Okay. Warlord Trait, Immaterial Echo. If Warlord casts a power at 9+, can cast another ability, which cannot be denied. Only 1 additional power can generate this way. Bit of an awkwardly worded one, this one, but I can see plenty of potential in that one. But it is restricted to that 9+. And Hourglass of Manite, first time bearer is destroyed, return at the end of the current phase with D3 wounds remaining. Use that one quite a few times. Generally I think that's the one I use in a Demon Prince quite a lot, to return it back at the end of the phase. If you die on your opponent's turn, it is quite handy. Yeah, overall okay. Cult of Scheming, psychic power, seeded strategy, blessing warp charge 7. Select friendly core unit within 24 inches. The unit can shoot and declare charge and turn it fell back. I think that's going to be essential. I think for 1000 Suns you might see 10-man squads of Scarab Occult, so having the ability to, essentially I believe they can just cast it on themselves, and then they can fall back, shoot, declare charge. Their weapons, their combat weapons are much more improved now. So I can see that as a very, very good way. If you've got a big blob and you want it to get the most out of it, that's quite good. Warlord Trait, Grand Schemer Order, 3 inches, cult units gain Obsec, just doubles if already Obsec. I think that's fantastic if you've got an opponent that is going to be playing the field. And Relic, Chakwai Thalstorm, once per battle, Stratagem is essentially free. Cult of Magic, Psychic Power, Astral Blast, Witchfire, Warp Charge 6, closest enemy unit within 12 inches and visible to the caster suffers D3 mortal wounds, and each other unit within 3 inches suffers mortal wounds. This implies that because it's every other unit, not every other enemy unit, implies that friendly units would suffer that mortal wound as well, but you can debate me on that one. Warlord Trait, Devastating Sorcery, once per psychic phase, Warlord can reroll Smite or Witchfire psychic test. And the relic is Arcane Focus. If army is Cabal of Sorcerers, the bearer gains the ability Arcane Focus. At the start of psychic phase, select a friendly unit, and each time a Cabbalistic Ritual is used on the unit, reduce its cost by 1. I think this is fine. You might go down very mortal wound heavy spam Warlords, casting spells, Witchfires and Smite, etc. Can be fine. Not probably my favourite one. Cult of Knowledge, Psychic Power, Etheric Trespass, Malediction, Warp Charge 6. Select one enemy unit within 24 inches. Until the start of your next psychic phase, each time an attack is made against that unit by a Cult of Knowledge unit, reroll wound rolls of 1. Fantastic, and honestly this may actually push it into number 1 for this psychic spell alone. Being able to reroll wound rolls is very, very good. There's not many units, if any, I think actually allow reroll wound rolls. Unfortunately, we don't have lieutenants or Scutari marshals or anything like that, though the sorcerer could have really used it. So this pushes it very, very, very much in terms of, I'd probably say, the lead one. If your opponent's playing knights, which not many people are, or if they have a big unit such as Magnus or Mortarion, this is going to help a lot. So yeah, this pushes way ahead. Warlord Trait, Ardent Scholar, Warlord reroll psychic test with dice roll of 1, very, very good. And then the relic is an Incladon's Cry, replace Warp Flame Pistol, range 12, strength 6, minus 3 AP and 1 damage, auto hits. Just a stronger Warp Flame Pistol. It's not bad, but it's not great. Overall, I would say, however, this is my favourite one for the spell alone. Rerolling wound rolls. Now, we do have ways to augment wound rolls in some ways, but that's a very nice spell. Cult of Change, Psychic Power, Dismanifestation, Malediction, Warp Charge 6, select an enemy unit within 18 inches, minus 1 to leadership and attack characteristic. And Warlord Trait, Fickle Nature, reroll charge for the Warlord and can shoot and charge when fallen back. Relic Capricious Crest. Once per battle, when Psychic Test is taken by a model within 18 inches, you can change result. Friendly changes from 1 to 6, enemy 1 changes from 6 to 1. I can see us maybe on a Demon Prince 1, that reroll charge and fall back and charge is very useful for them, just allow them to move around the lines. The Psychic ability is not the best in that one, but it can be useful. And the Relic, you know what, it is very situational, very, very situational, but it can help to stop an opponent or help you. Though I'd probably say there's plenty of abilities to actually help you secure casts. Call of Duplicity, Psychic Power, Sorcerer's Facade, Blessing, Warp Charge 8, select a friendly infantry or monster within 6 inches, remove from the battlefield, and set up again more than 9 inches away from an enemy unit. I think this one moves into either first or second place with the one I said previously, mainly for the sheer fact that being able to control the board is very, very important. Being able to move your unit from, say, the warp, Rubric Marine unit, they warp flame something, absolutely incinerates them, and then they sort of maybe get left in a corner. This, if you get a sorcerer near them, or I think even your aspiring sorcerer and the squads could just cast it, this can move them away onto another more vulnerable part and flame again. Correct me if I'm wrong in that one, but that is quite useful. Having that mobility, 4,000 Suns, is very, very important. Warlord Trait, Master Misinformator. At the start of the first battle round, D3 units, not vehicles, from your army can be sort of redeployed. Don't really like that one. Relic Perfidious Tome. In each command phase, bearer can read from the tome. Roll a d6. On a 1, your opponent gains a command point. On a 4+, you gain 1. Absolutely love it. A little bit of risk reward. 1 in 6. It looks like probably once in a game your opponent will gain a command point. You're going to gain 2.5 or something like that. There's 5 turns, 50% chance, 2.5. It's fun. It's interesting. It's okay. Not the best relic, but certainly one for a little bit of high risk, high rewards. But the psychic ability is very useful. And the last cult is the Cult of Manipulation. Psychic Power, Attempted Possession, Malediction, Warp Charge 5. Select an enemy unit within 18 inches. Unit suffers 1 mortal wounds until the next psychic phase. Each time that unit takes a psychic test, subtract 2. That's not going to be useful unless you're playing against many, many psychers, but fair enough. Warlord Trait, Beguiling Influence. When attacks are made against Warlords, hit, wound and damage rolls cannot be rerolled. Against things like Marines, that's going to be pretty useful. And Relic Sorithus Mirror, the bearer during the fight phase can choose not to fight, and instead choose an enemy infantry model with a leadership of 9 or less. It attacks its own unit, which by sounds of it can be the model itself, as it's mentioned if the model wipes out the unit, then the bearer counts as destroying the unit. That one can be pretty good. A stop hitting myself situation is always funny in 40k. But overall, this one is kind of mediocre in that one. So the ones that I see that I quite like, I like the Cult of Time. I think that one's going to be pretty okay. I really liked the Cult of Knowledge for that reroll 1s. That's going to be handy. And the Duplicity spell that allows you to redeploy an infantry or a monster. The 3 that I can see having the most potential. So Duplicity, Knowledge, and Time are probably 3 I like. But again, this is only my first impressions. Very interested to hear what people think. Moving on to Chapter Approved. These are the secondary objectives that you can choose in missions if you wish. So we'll start with the Warpcraft one, Mutate Landscape, 1000 Suns, Psyker Action. Warp Charge 4, Psychers perform action while near an objective that is not mutated already. If successful, objective is mutated and the warp charge of this goes up by 1. 3 victory points each time an objective marker is mutated. So this starts out cheap then. I think it'll move on to 7 once you get to your 5th one, which will give you your maximum 15 points. In a game with only 4 points, this isn't going to be as relevant. When it's 6, yeah, you can get on there. So it's not bad, considering how many Psychers you do have between Rubric, Scarabs. If you're a multiple small unit going and you've got many Psychers in that one, yeah, this one is very possible. No Mercy, No Respite, Wrath of Magnus. Opponent must have at least 1 Psyker in their army. 3 victory points if more enemy models than friendly models were destroyed this battle round as a result of Psychic Power. I think this might be a go-to one unless you're playing against things, say, like Grey Knights or Demons. If your opponent brings like a single Psyker just as a support, you instantly know that you're more or less going to cause more damage, especially if you bring Magnus. You know that you're going to, if you even cause one, one casualty and your opponent's just trying to cause, buffs in theirs, then yeah, you are going to cause more casualties and get those 3 points. So I really like that one. I think that one's going to be probably the best one I've seen when it comes to Thousand Suns, because if you're not killing your opponent's mortal wounds in Psychic phase, you ain't playing Thousand Suns. Shadow Operations, Burn Empires, Thousand Suns Infantry action. One or more infantry can start to perform this action at the end of the movement phase. Must be in range of different objective marker, not within your deployment zone and not previously burned. Cannot perform if enemy units in range of objective marker, not aircraft though. Next command phase, receive 4 victory points. I don't like this one as much, mainly because you can't do it in your own objective marker. You'll have to move out and get those other ones, and you'll still need to get at least 4 of them to get maximum points. I generally don't like that one. Maybe if there's like objective markers, there's plenty of them not in your deployment zone, but overall I don't like it. Simply put, you have to move about, and it's not going to be easy victory points to get straight off the bat. Purge the enemy, Sorceress Prowess, score 5 victory points for each psychic character destroyed during your psychic phase, and 3 for all other psyker units. I don't like this one. If you're going to play against Grey Knights or Demons, yeah, sure, this actually might be quite good, but it's the fact you've got to destroy the character or destroy the unit, and it has to be during a psychic ability. If you're rocking Magnus against Grey Knights, be careful, but sure, every time he wipes out a unit, it's going to be 5 victory points. Well, sorry, 3 victory points, and if you kill a character, it's going to be 5, and it has to be a psychic phase, so there is limits in that one. I think overall in these, the Wrath of Magnus is the best one. Just being able to, your opponent has to unlock it by having a psyker, but then you just need to cause untold carnage. Even just one model will do the job if your opponent isn't able to kill any. If they're just trying to buff their units around them, then yeah, you're going to get those victory points pretty easily. On to stratagems. Now I have posted the pages of stratagems, but I'm going to speak about the highlighted ones that I like best. So if you want to read, go ahead. Otherwise, I'll speak about these. Fated Mutations, 1 command point, used in the fight phase on spawn. You can choose the mutated beyond reasonability and +1 attack per model. This is fine, it's cheap. Spawns are very vulnerable, but they can be a very good harassing unit. I've never really used them, but I think if you put them in tactical reserve, or if you manage to get into your opponent's lines, they are just an absolute pain, but they are also very easy to just smack out of existence. So, good thing they're cheap. This is a cheap ability. I have seen lists where people have done well just using them to get points, and your opponents have to deal with them. I think it's just over 100 points to take a group of 5, move across the field, and your opponent has to think about them. So, worth thinking about if you are going to use spawns, or they should not be named. Your choice on that one. Unwavering Phalanx, 1 to 3 command points, used in the opponent's shooting phase when Rubric, Marines or Scarab Occult unit is targeted. Till end of phase, reduce damage by 1. 1 to 5 models, this is 1 command point, otherwise is 3 command points. This is excellent, really, really good. Will combine well with high number units that you want to buff up, and trust me, you probably want to do that. Also works well with All is Dust, because All is Dust now, I believe, as if you've obviously got a damage characteristic of 1, they get +1 to their armor save or their armor roll. So if you were hitting them with 2 damage, well, now you're doing 1 less damage, and they're getting a save boost. So it's quite handy in that regard as well. I personally think, and I will try having 10 Scarab Occult, that's going to be sort of my drop force and cause damage. But then again, Rubric Marines with Flamers is always very tempting as well at the moment. Yeah, I just think this is a really, really good one to keep in your back burner, so good. Wrath of the Wronged, 2 command points, used in the shooting or fight phase when Arcana Astartes infantry attack, add 1 to wound rolls. Updated vets, still improving wound rolls is always very, very good. It's going to combine well with a lot of your ranged and also close combat weapons, especially in Scarab Occults. We'll speak about that later. Infernal Fusillade, 1 command points, used in shooting phase when Arcana Astartes infantry shoots with a bolt weapon. Make 1 additional attack. Now, the example they use here is that if you're, for instance, got the combi Infernal Bolter and you're in rapid fire range, usually that'd be 4 shots, it would now be 5. If you've got a unit of 10, which is what you're probably going to have for Rubrics or Scarabs, it's going to be 10 extra shots. That can be fine for 1 command point. Stack up a bunch of buffs, you're in, yeah, it could do well. Malignant Pact, 1 command point. Using the command phase when Infernal Master fails a pact. Select an infantry or cavalry unit within 6 inches. Unit suffers a mortal wound and the pact is successful. Small price for success. I think that's a very, very good one. If you're going to use the Infernal Master, you always want to make sure they pull off their ability. It's a 3+ to pull it off, but you just need to cause a mortal wound and off you go, and you can have that succeed if you did actually fail. So yeah, I see him as a buff unit doing quite well in that regard. Warped Regeneration, used in the Psychic phase. If a unit from your army manifests a Psychic power with an unmodified roll of 9 or more. Models in that unit can regain D3 wounds or return a model. Scarab Occult, obviously a very good one for this, and Magnus will love it. Now it is unmodified, but still, returning those wounds to Magnus is always going to infuriate your opponent. Psychic, I remember once I brought him down to 1 wound, and then I think by the end of the game he was back up to like 15, and oh, that one really hurt. Psychic Domination, 1 command point. Using opponent's Psychic phase when a Thousand Sun Psyker attempts to deny, and it has another Psyker within 6 inches that can also deny, roll an additional d6 for the deny attempt. Good defense. I don't think it stops you from actually denying with that other Psyker, but they have to have been able to do so. Bit of wording on that one, but yeah, just make sure a wee bit more defense. And Master of the Immaterium, 1 command point. Used in Psychic phase when a unit suffers Perils of the Warp, ignore the peril. Easy. Risen Rubric, 2 command points. Using during deployment, set up a Rubric Marine unit 9 inches away from enemy deployment and 9 inches away from enemy models. Warp Flamers now 12 inches. This could work out well if you get turn 1. That's going to be some flames. Webly Infiltration, 2 command point, 3 command point. Using during deployment, can put an infantry unit in reserve for 2 command points or 2 units for 3 command points. Can only be used once. Deployment options are always useful. I know many people sometimes use the tactical reserves coming from the edge, etc. This one I think does work out well. It just means you can come on to, say for instance, onto objective markers easier, etc. I think it's still very, very handy to have. Vector Strike, 1 command point. Using the movement phase when a Heldrake makes a normal move over a unit that is not a character with 9 wounds or less. Roll the d6 and on a 2+, inflict d3 mortal wounds. If you can fly, inflict 3 mortal wounds instead. Gives a bit more reason to bring a Heldrake. It's good for harassment if there's a lot of flying units, just some easy mortal wounds. Though my view is on Demon Engines and Thousand Suns is contentious at best, but I'll maybe speak to that when I get to them. Last of the stratagems here, Inescapable for Warning, 2 command points. Used when an opponent sets up a unit from reinforcements within 18 inches of an Arcana Astartes Psyker. Select 1 Arcana Astartes core unit within 6 inches of the previous Psyker unit, non-engagement range, and within 18 inches of the target unit. You can then basically make a shot at them. It's a bit complicated. I think Rubrics and Scarabs can just choose themselves as both are core and Psyker units. So yeah, shooting them when they come in from reinforcements, but there's a little bit of a long-worded way to it when really I think the units you're probably going to do it with are already Psykers. But fair enough. Slow and Purposeful, 1 command point. Arcana Astartes infantry unit. When it makes a normal move, they count as stationary. A bit of an odd one. Suppose it's good for rapid fire rubrics if they're on the move, but still, you know, won't really affect Terminators, I guess, because they kind of always count as being stationary for their rapid fire weapons anyway. So it's a bit of an odd one, but fair. Etheric Saturation, 1 command point. Used in the Psychic phase when a Psyker character is within 12 inches of a friendly Mutalith Vortex beast. Sacrifice 1 cast for D3 wounds. Handy, probably to go along with Magnus, and if not casting, but why wouldn't you cast with Magnus? Going to cast all the way. You can even use a spell to cast, get more heals. Then you heal. Yeah, it can be fine. I just think maybe if you're like were planning to heal Magnus and you thought, oh, I might fail that psychic test, even though failing with him is almost impossible with Magnus, you can spend that 1 command point and you know you're just going to heal that D3 wounds. Soul Reap, 1 command point. Use in the shooting phase when a Thousand Suns unit makes a ranged attack. If the target is 11 models or more, Soul Reaper cannons make 2 hits instead of 1. Heavy 5 becomes Heavy 10. Scarab Occult units can take 2 when there are 10-man squad, so that becomes, from those 2 models, 20 shots, which will mess up a whole bunch of Horde units. On to the Warlord Traits, and I was very tempted to have how could I put it, blank out the Magnus and Ahriman ones and be like, oh, we'll only get them to the data sheet, but I figured it's cleaner for you guys to see them now, and then you can work out what abilities they have when they get to the data sheet. So you can see them here, but I will list off the best ones I find here. So we have Undying Form, which is reduced damage inflicted on Warlord by 1. Very good in Demon Prince, but Magnus as well does have this, so good bit of survivability there. Lord of the Forbidden Lore. Warlord knows 1 additional psychic power, or if this is Magnus, he knows all the spells he has access to. That is, as far as I know, 18 spells he can cast. It just makes him a very good, switchblade knife of usefulness. So yeah, I'm glad they had this, because Magnus before only being able to choose some felt odd. Now he is just going to have so many spells. Otherworldly Prescience allows 3-up invul. Sadly not an Magnus, but if you had this as well, it would have been crazy. But it is on Ahriman and gives him a good bit of survivability, so it is very helpful. Overall, in most cases, I think you're probably going to take Magnus as your Warlord, followed by Ahriman, followed by maybe a Demon Prince, or maybe one of the other abilities on there as well. But basically, when you've got Magnus, who, as long as you can keep him alive, is going to have untold amounts of spells, and once they buff himself up, it's fine. I think there are some strategies, people saying you could, put him into tactical reserves and come in from an edge. That's when I read from somewhere that people sometimes do, which is fair. But yeah, I do like the ones, 3 different ones for Magnus. Knowing all the spells and reducing damage by 1 is going to help him significantly. His other one is reroll Deny the Witch test, which is fine. And then if you're Cabbalistic Sorcerers, which you're probably going to be, he gets to benefit from an additional ritual, which is okay as well. Yeah, overall, they're fine. There's good best survivability ones, which are the key to it. But again, if you're playing Thousand Suns and not bringing Magnus or Ahriman, interesting. And we come to something new here, which is the Infernal Pacts. These are abilities for the Infernal Master, working very much like chaplains. So you can read the abilities there on the right. If you've got any questions about it, let me know. But the ones I like are Fires of the Abyss. Closest enemy unit within 15 inches suffers D3 mortal wounds. More mortal wounds, always very, very handy. Capering Imps, 24 inches. Cause a unit to lose cover. Cannot fire Overwatch or set to defend. Okay way to just sort of hinder a unit. Make them a little bit more vulnerable. Glimpse of Eternity, you can reroll 1 dice you roll except rerolls. Always extremely helpful to keep a reroll in the back pocket. Malefic Maelstrom, select a Thousand Suns unit within 24 inches invisible. Until the next command phase, ranged weapons in this unit have +1 strength. So this is the key way to get your bolters into strength 5, which is very nice. Getting your warp flamers into strength 5, which is very nice. Generally you're going to find this if you're going to take, and I think there's further ways to augment this in the psychic abilities, but if you're going to take a big unit of Scarab Occult or Rubrics, this will just make them far more dangerous. So I can see the Malefic, I think you can take 2 abilities, I could be wrong in that. I can see the Malefic Maelstrom being one of them, which is very, very handy, and maybe the Glimpse of Eternity just to have that reroll are probably the 2 go-to ones for the Infernal Master. On to Thousand Sun Relics, and there is about 17 to choose from here. None of them I would consider absolute mega auto takes like you saw with the Skitarii Marshal, though that's maybe up for debate now. Still very useful, but there are many useful ones here that I quite like the look of, so you can see them there, but I will highlight the ones I quite like. So we've got Seer's Bane, which replaces a Force Stave or Prospering Kopesh, which is a melee weapon, strength 2, minus 4 AP and D3 damage, and if the target is a Psyker though, it is double strength and D6 damage. Very useful against Psyker heavy armies such as Grey Knights and Demons. Imbralific Crystal, yep, once per battle in the command phase, the bearer or friendly infantry within 6 inches, remove and set up in reinforcement step, replaces Dark Matter Crystal, but half the range. Still very useful. It would just be nice to have that extended range like the Dark Master Crystal did have. Coruscator, yep, replaces an Infernal Bolt Pistol. Its range is 18, pistol 3, strength 5, minus 2 AP and 2 damage. It's actually an okay upgrade for Exalted Sorcerers on a disc to hopefully snipe some 2-wound Marines. Run about, green goblining over with their flying pad and shoot some Marines out. Always pretty good. Athenium Scroll is Exalted Sorcerer only. Once per battle in Psychic phase, user can read from the scroll, select Psychic power from Disc of Change or Vengeance. From the rest of the battle, each time bearer attempts that power, roll an additional d6 and discard one of the d6. Very good, very good relic to have. I see that one being used quite a lot, probably for sheer fact just to get more reliable casts. And last one is, I'm never going to pronounce this right, Iglikian's Ore. Command phase, select an enemy visible to the bearer. Bearer gains aura of 6 inches that grants core units who target the selected enemy to ignore weapon skill, bliss skill, hit, wound modifiers and damage reduction. Another very useful one. I think that's going to be good if you have an Exalted Sorcerer with a reroll hit rolls of 1 for core units, for instance if they're on Rubrics or Scarab Occult, then yeah, that's going to be very useful to make them a lot more reliable. The Kronos Totorum model with Warlord Trait, once per battle in your command phase. Give this model an additional Warlord Trait. Must be unique. So a Demon Prince, possibly, I think, can get a 3-up invul and -1 damage. Yep, that's going to be pretty good. Though I think in that one you could then no longer have Magnus or Ahriman in that case, because both of them have those Warlord Traits, so you'd have to sacrifice both of them. Whether it's worth it or not, don't know, but still quite a very nice combination. Conniving Plate, Arcana Astartes, only is a 2+ save. Any models can only allocate half its attacks against the bearer. Now the questions are obviously, is that rounding up or down, and if they are only viable target, are the attacks lost? I feel the rounding up or down might be in the rulebook, but if it's the only viable target and it says that half its attacks can only allocate against the bearer, I guess the attacks in my view would be lost. Warpweave Mantle, charges of 9+ against the model, always fail. If this model has lost a wound, then add 1 to its psychic tests. Bit of an odd relic this one, but I suppose if you ever had a model that was out and it was going to get deep striked in the backfield and it had this relic on, then yeah, it's going to be more or less an auto fail if they do try and charge. And then the extra psychic test part is okay. Paradoxical Chatterfowl infantry model. At the start of the fight phase, select an enemy model within 3 inches of the bearer and roll a d3 until the next fight phase. Reduce the model's weapon skill, bliss skill by results from the psychic tests and also from psychic tests made from the model. Considering how I believe it's only to hit modifiers, maybe wound as well, that's +1 and -1, I don't think this applies to stats, so you can keep debuffing stats a certain amount and it will keep applying. So you could turn like a 2+ to hit into a 5+ to hit, and say you've even got -1 to hit on there as well as a natural one, it'd be 6s to hit. Correct me if I'm wrong on that one, if characteristics can be augmented further than -1, but I'm pretty sure it was only the to hit and maybe to wound modifiers that was the case. But correct me if I'm wrong. The Pentataric Armour, Infernal Master only, knows an additional pact. Once per battle, this the first saving throw that failed, the damage is reduced to 0. This is fine. Honestly, I don't think the Infernal Master needs to know more than 2. I think if you want to have 3, go for it, but I think 2 of them would do quite well. And then obviously reducing damage is handy as well, just in case someone tries to take him out. Then he'll stick about for a bit longer. Finally, on to the psychic powers, which I'm sure many people are quite excited on that one. What's interesting is that there's now 2 disciplines to choose from, the Discipline of Change and Discipline of Vengeance, and it appears most units have access to both, and they each have 9 powers instead of 6, which is very unusual. You randomly generate it by rolling a d33. Honestly, I have no idea why they still entertain the thoughts of randomly generating psychic abilities. There's no benefit to it. It's only a hindrance, so it seems a little bit odd, but maybe they should bring a benefit in and then people might actually do it, but I've never seen it in a game so far. Anyway, I have posted up pictures of the psychic powers, but I will speak about my favourites. So we've got the Discipline of Change here. Glamour of Zinj, Blessing, Warp Charge 6, 18 inches, standard -1 to hit. Doombolt, Witchfire, Warp Charge 6, 18 inches, closest enemy unit suffers 3 mortal wounds, no movement hindrances anymore. I think it's now gone from D3 mortal wounds and a movement hindrance to just 3 mortal wounds, which I think is fine. Temporal Manipulation, Blessing, Warp Charge 5, 12 inches, Thousand Suns models, bar vehicles recover D3 wounds, can only be healed once a turn. This was kind of a standard to take with Magnus to keep him going. Weaver Fates Blessing, warp charge 7, 18 inches, models in the unit receive a 4-up invul. This is the reason why there's no more 3-up invul for Magnus, or any unit in particular, which is annoying, but still that 4-up invul is useful to many other models. Cabbalistic Curse, sure. Malediction, warp charge 6, select an enemy unit within 18 inches until the start of next psychic phase, subtract 1 from strength of ranged weapons. Very nice if your opponent has a big weapon, range, then you just want to reduce their strength, which is okay. Pyrrhic Flux, Blessing, warp charge 5, 12 inches, choose an Arcana Astartes unit, increase strength of warp flame weapons by 1. This was what I mentioned in combination with the Infernal Master. If you combine this one with I think it was the Maelstrom, the Malefic Maelstrom, which has increased the strength of ranged weapons, it's going to make your warp flame weapons strength 6 if you need them to be. So plenty of access to that, plus the new Vengence, or the new Veterans of the Long War, Wrath of the Wronged. That'll give you a lot more access to damage with your warp flame weapons, so I think that's quite a good one. Or just in general, even in bolt weapons, making them strength 5 is very good. Perplex, Malediction, warp charge 7, select an enemy unit within 24 inches. When making ranged attacks, it cannot select units over 24 inches. Would be good if we had many actual units that had ranges over 24 inches. Usually I think they're just the demon engines, but still it is quite a good limiting one for opponent if they've got a backfield unit, though it is a cast 24 inches, so it means there's going to be at least one unit going to be in range. Discipline of Vengeance next, and we have Twist of Fate, Malediction, warp charge 8, select an enemy unit within 12 inches, unit cannot benefit from invul saves. Presage, Blessing, warp charge 7, friendly unit within 18 inches, until next psychic phase receive +1 tet rolls, so that's your standard prescience. Swelled by the Warp, Blessing, warp charge 6, friendly model within 12 inches, until the next psychic phase, +2 strength, +1 attack, that's your diabolic strength. Temporal Surge, Blessing, warp charge 7, select friendly infantry, cavalry, beast unit within 6 inches, it can make a normal move. So this is your, basically you could make your move from the Dark Hereticus, it's been a wee while for that one, Warp Surge I believe. And it is now making sure Magnus is not going to benefit from this one. Quite a bit of a hurtful change in that one, and one I'm going to imagine we're going to see in the Chaos Space Marine book as well, though that needs plenty of changes. Yeah, that one is going to hurt, no longer launching Magnus up the field. Empiric Guidance, Blessing, warp charge 4, select friendly unit within 12 inches, add 6 to rapid fire and heavy weapon ranges. Okay, I mean there's going to be times where you need those 30-inch rapid fire weapons, so it's going to be useful. Desecration of Worlds, Malediction, warp charge 7, select enemy unit within 24 inches and visible. Until next psychic phase, each time selected unit either moves, advances, falls back, or makes a charge. Roll a d6 for each model, on a 6 suffers a mortal wound. Now I would say in the psychics, many of them are just the old ones and they have been updated. You see your remove an invul, Temporal Surge, though not as good as before. You've got your recover wounds, you've got your -1 to hit, your Weaver Fates has changed. They have taken the ones that were very, very powerful, they have changed them for the worse in many ways, but they've kept all the good ones kind of there and then tried out a few other ones as well. The one that allows you to increase your warp flame weapons is going to be pretty good on that side. You are 12 inches after all, so there's going to be plenty of access to that. But yeah, it's more about this, rather than new and breaking everything, they have balanced out a lot of the auto takes and they have kept the good ones, which in some ways good, but in other ways I think we kind of wanted to be able to launch Magnus up the field turn 1 charges, but I suppose in the game sense that might not have been such a good thing, though toughness 8 would have been. Finally coming to data sheets, and I'm going to start off with ones that here you'll see I'm really not going to cover, though I'm going to speak a bit about the Sorcerer and Terminator armour. I'm just not going to show you their data sheet. And simply put, there's 10 points difference between the Sorcerer and the Exalted Sorcerer, and I think the Terminator one might be more expensive than the Exalted Sorcerer. But there's a lot of differences that makes me think, why is there only a 10-point difference, and why isn't there like a bit more rules? So the examples are, the Exalted Sorcerer is 2+ weapon skill, ballistic skill, while the Sorcerer is 3+. The Exalted Sorcerer has 5 wounds, 5 attacks, while the Sorcerer has 4 on each. The Exalted Sorcerer has a 4-up invul, the Sorcerer has none, and the Exalted Sorcerer has reroll hit rolls of 1 for core unit aura within 6 inches, while the Sorcerer has Thral, which means it won't take up a battlefield roll slot if there's an Exalted Sorcerer. And that's kind of it. They've got the same psychic abilities, but for 10 points, the invul save alone is maybe kind of worth it. And you also have access on the Exalted Sorcerer to the disc, so you can get increased mobility. They should have had something on the Sorcerer, maybe that it can sacrifice psychic abilities to buff psychic powers around them, or add 1 to cast, I don't know. But without some kind of additional feature, I really don't see much point in the Sorcerer, and I feel that's kind of an absolute wasted opportunity. Cultists, Hellbrutes, Chaos Spawn, Land Raiders, Chaos Rhino, Defiler, Chaos Predator, Destructor, Annihilator, and Vindicator. I'm really not going to cover these because a lot of these have either been covered in the Death Guard Codex, or in the case of the Vindicator, it's kind of the same as Space Marine. It's more or less the same on these ones. These ones I don't feel are the most exciting to speak about, but things like Forgefiend and Maulerfiend I will, because it's the first time we're seeing updates on them. First up is Ahriman and Demon Prince. Know that Ahriman was certainly a staple in most Thousand Sun forces, and you'd see a few Demon Princes. I use them quite often. So Ahriman has now +1 wound, +1 attack. Blackstaff is now +3 strength, and is no longer a demon on a disc, which is quite helpful for any abilities that might have targeted demons, certainly the Grey Knight case. +1 psychic and deny tests are gone, now allowed a rerolled psychic test, not just failed, which is very, very nice. And of course reroll hit rolls of 1 for Thousand Suns core. Demon Prince are +1 attack, weapons changed to similar to Death Guard, they have a 4-up invul, reroll hit rolls of 1 for core units, and they know 2 spell, manifest 2, deny 1. The Exalted Sorcerer Infernal Master. Exalted Sorcerer now has +1 attack and now a 4-up invul. I believe it was 5+ previously. And of course the reroll ones with cult core units. Knows 2 spells, manifest 2, deny 1. The Infernal Master is movement 6, weapon skill, bliss skill 3+, strength and toughness 4, wounds and attacks of 4, and leadership 9 with 3-up save. No smite and 1 psychic power, manifest 1, deny 1. Model knows 2 Infernal Pacts, can attempt to make a pact it knows that has not already been attempted by a friendly model, succeeds in a 3+. Because the way it's worded, because it says you can attempt a pact it knows 2, that implies you can do 2. But it also says you can attempt a pact, so you can interpret that as singular. So you can attempt a pact, which means singular, or you can attempt a pact, which means kind of any pact, because there are 2 of them. Interesting wording on that one. I think there might be a little bit of an FAQ on that one, just to clarify what they entirely mean by that one. But I do see that, Infernal Master might be a good one to go along with either, large unit of either Scarabs or Rubrics with bolters, or Warp Flamers, buff up the ranged weapons of them. You can make them strength 5 or 6 through either a combination of either Psychic Ability or the Infernal Pact, or both to get them strength 6, and that is quite good. So I like it. It's just a shame that it doesn't have the reroll hit rolls of 1. I suppose that then maybe favours it to go with Flamers, because then the reroll hit rolls of 1 doesn't matter. But yeah, I can see combinations in here. When you're going to eliminate infantry, this along with Warp Flamers is going to do the job. So yeah, I can see some potential. In terms of points for this, I'm actually just going to refer to that quickly. The Infernal Master is 90 points, so it's like the same cost as a Sorcerer there. Yeah, I can see it with a bit of potential on that one. Rubric Marines and Scarab Occult. So Rubric Marines have gone to 1 to 10 models instead of 20. I think that was the same change in Death Guards. They are now movement 6, so they are a bit quicker now, which is excellent. I think beforehand it was their champion was 6 and they were 5, and it was a bit weird. They are wound and attack 2, which is the same as Death Guards. Icon of Flame now give an additional Cabal point, and the auto pass morale, and all is dust appears to be the same. In terms of the upgrade for the Icon of Flame, you're playing 10 points, and that will give you that extra Cabal point. Kind of maybe possibly worth it. Really just depends on how much Cabal points you are playing with. Aspiring Sorcerer knows Smite 1 spell and Manifest 1 spell and denies 1 spell, and very importantly, the Smite works normally. It doesn't work like the weird one where you only did a certain amount of damage. It now works properly, so that kind of makes it worth it if you are wanting to do a little bit of Smite spam. Sure, that it does go up per cost, but you are doing it normally now, which is very, very handy. I think if Smite didn't go up and you had all these small units of Rubrics, you would just be throwing mortal wounds around for absolute days. So yeah, I can see why they maybe didn't increase the points, or they didn't keep the points for the Grey Knights and Thousand Sons the same as the previous edition. Scarab Occult Terminators are movement 5 and wound and attacks of 3. Their Hellfire is now 36 inches, and a very important change here, the Prospering Kopesh is now +1 strength, -3 AP, and 2 damage. That 2 damage does make a heck of a difference in terms of their viability for combat. Interestingly, that Death Guard have so many just damage 1 stuff for their combat stuff, while these guys are pulling off the 2 damage. Obviously, you know, Death Guard have a great way to get around it because they just reduce down to 1 damage, but it certainly makes them a very viable in combat as well, especially against Marines, just that extra 2 damage and the +1 strength. So yeah, Scarab Occult really went up in my eyes on that one. The Autopass Morale, all his dust appears to be the same, no Smite and 1 Psychic Power, Manifest 1 and Deny 1. Overall, I think they're quite nice. I think Rubrics and Scarabs, so Rubrics are now 21 points, while Scarab Occult are 40 points a model. On to Tzaangors. Tzaangors have been reduced in weapon skill to 4+, I think they were 3+ previously, and they've now got a Herd Banner, allows reroll of morale tests. Tzaangor Enlighted's stats the same. Fate Caster, their bow, is 30 inches, assault 1, ignores Lookout Sir and always hits on a 2+, so this is trying to give them a sort of anti-character weapon. It doesn't cause the mortal wound when you roll a 6, you know, when you go to wound, but it does always hit on a 2+, which is kind of handy, I guess, especially considering how their bliss skill isn't actually 2, but fair enough. Divine Spear is now damage 2, which is okay, and Guided by Fate remains the same. Tzaangor Shaman and Mutalith Vortex Beast next. So the Tzaangor Shaman offers +1 tip for Bray and Enlightened units within 6 inches. I suppose that's probably why they reduced Tzaangor's tip in combat by 1. Knows 1 spell, manifests 1 and denies 1, and only knows Discipline of Change. Mutalith Vortex Beast is a little bit more complex, so its move is 10, 8 and 6. Its weapon skills 3, 4 and 5 as it deteriorates, and Vortex powers are 2, 1 and 0, which I think is quite a change. Attacks always 5. Enormous Claws, +1 strength, making it strength 8, which is useful. 3 damage, Mutant Regeneration, recovers D3 wounds in command phase and explodes in 4+. Every unit within 6 inches suffers D3 mortal wounds. Also Unstable Realities is gone. Warp Vortex now has 4 abilities in the shooting phase. You perform the number of abilities as your datasheet says, depending on the amount of wounds you've got left. So the 4 abilities you have is Immaterial Flare, select unit within 18 inches, roll a d6 for each model, they suffer mortal wound on 6+. That's your sort of anti-horde, though I think if it's a horde unit of 30, they're going to suffer 5 mortal wounds. Might have been better if there was a way to get that to maybe make it a 5s, then you would see much more mortal wounds and a bit more return. Maybe that might have been too good. Turbulent Discharge, closest enemy unit within 18 inches, 2 to 4, d3 mortal wounds, 5+, it's 3 mortal wounds, so that's a more heavier hit. If it's a smaller unit, that's going to be more helpful. Maelstrom of Madness, every enemy unit suffers 1 mortal wound on a 2+, so that's your AoE. And the Beam of Unreality, enemies with 10 or more wounds within 24 inches, roll a d6 with -1 to aircraft, +1 to Titanic. 3 to 4, they suffer d3 mortal wounds, and a 5 is d6. Overall, for its cost, I think it's coming out at about 145 points. Yep. I don't know in this one. I think it's also, it doesn't have, well, it'll probably have the, you know, a little bit of protection on it. I don't think it's probably one of the best models out there in terms of its abilities. Its special abilities, the mortal wound ones, I'm just not that sold on. But then again, there might be ways around it. You know, there might be ways. It is a very cool model. It is one that was pulled from Age of Sigmar into this. Yeah, I think it's fine. The changes, I'm just not too sure on. In general, I was never sure on the Mutalith Vortex Beast before, and I'm still not 100% sure on it at the moment. If I'm wrong on that one, let me know. Forgefiend and Maulerfiend have seen a slight few changes here. Honestly, it pains me that Forgefiend and Maulerfiend are kind of part of Thousand Sons. I know Thousand Sons use Automata, but these ones just seem very, very odd. They need Death Guard treatment to have their own demon engines, which would be really, really cool. Yeah, I don't want to complain about that one too much, because I can complain about it all day, but it's the point made. So Forgefiend is weapon skill, bliss skill 3/4/5 to hit, and then 5 attacks at all times. Ectoplasm Cannon is now 36 inches, heavy D3, strength 7, minus 3 AP and 3 damage blast. While the heavy Hades autocannon is 48 inches, heavy 4, strength 8, minus 2 AP and 2 damage. So some nice changes on the weapons there, just to make them, I think, a little bit more relevant, a little bit more useful, so I'm quite happy with that one. Maulerfiend, weapon skill, bliss skill 3/4/5 to hit. They have 6 attacks, and magma cutters are just 1 item now. So magma cutter is range 6, assault 2, strength 8, minus 4 AP and D6 damage plus 2. So that is going to be really nice if you are up close to a vehicle. It's a lot better than before to cause some serious damage. Lasher Tendrils is melee, strength user, minus 2 AP and 1 damage, makes 6 extra attacks. That's a heavy nerf. It used to be, I think, 2 damage beforehand, and was a very clear go-to over the magma cutters. In some essence, I still think they're maybe good to go ahead, but not being damaged 2 really is quite hurtful. Maulerfiend Fists, melee strength times 2, minus 3 AP, D3 plus 3 damage. That's going to knock anything out of the park. If it's a thing without an invul save, it is really, really going to hurt, and it's going to suffer a huge amount of damage. Also has Siege Crawler, ignore any and all modifiers, charge rolls. Overall, I still love my Maulerfiends, but maybe with the Lasher Tendril change, not as much as I used to. But the Maulerfiend Fist, certainly the D3 plus 3 damage is very, very nice, and the extra attack and the weapon skill now being 3+ is very good. And the Forgefiend I do like as well. I think it's quite useful. Ultimately in Thousand Suns though, I just wish there was something else. On to the Heldrake, another unit. I'm just like, why is this in Thousand Suns? But I've never been a big proponent for demon engines in general, other than the Defiler, but nostalgia might be blinding me there. Either way, I really think Heldrake, of all the units in this, do not match Thousand Suns, but I think when Thousand Suns get reinforcements, in however time that will be, they will be very cool. But nonetheless, I'm reviewing the Codex. That's a unit in the Codex. I'm not going to complain about what I think Thousand Suns should get, because I could fill a video with that. Heldrake has changed. It's mainly now a flyer rather than its sort of skimmer ability before. So its movement changed. It is now 20 to 60, 20 to 45 and 20 to 30, depending on if it's wounded. Its weapon skill, bliss skill are 3, 4 and 5 to hit, and it's got 5 attacks. Baleflamer is 18 inches, assault 2d3, strength 6, minus 2 AP, 2 damage and auto hits. Hades autocannon is 36 inches, heavy 4, strength 8, minus 2 AP and 2 damage. And the Heldrake claws are melee, strength user, minus 2 AP, 2 damage, and aircraft suffer 4 damage. So if your opponent is using aircrafts, they better be a wee bit wary of Heldrakes picking them up. It's got Airborne Predator, while in effect can only charge aircraft units, can only be charged by fly units, can only make melee attacks against fly units, or hit by them in engagement range. Interesting, it means it can't charge fly units, it can only charge aircraft units, but if it is charged by them, it can still attack. Bit of a weird one. Supersonic and hard to hit has been added. Can go into hover mode, so it makes its movement base 20. Removes the Airborne Predator and hard to hit and supersonic if you want to crawl across the floor and or bound across it, 20-inch movement, and pick up other units. Hunter in the Skies, +1 to hit against fly units, both melee and ranged. So yeah, if you are using the Hades autocannon, you're a bit more accurate. Though I still really like my Baleflamer. Now that it's 2d3, yeah, I could certainly see a lot of potential more in the Baleflamer than the Hades autocannon. And finally, Lord of War at the back of the book is Magnus the Red, the first Demon Primarch to come back to 40k, or at least the first Primarch to come back at 40k, which was a glorious moment. Always love seeing Magnus. So, he's not toughness 8. I think I was a bit surprised by that one. I know that maybe, Mortarion, they wanted to make toughness 8 in, true Death Guard fashion, but it would have been a lot handier to have these Demon Primarchs that you're putting a lot of points into. I mean, 450 points, and he's not toughness 8. I think that's a little bit of a misstep. Attacks are 8, 7 and 6, and the Blade of Magnus is melee times 2, minus 4 AP and 3 damage. After the bear has fought, select one enemy module that has lost wounds as a result of attacks made, but not destroyed. They suffer D3 mortal wounds. that is, I mean, the last ability wasn't that great, to be honest. This one, just if you don't finish something off, which at 8 attacks at 3 damage apiece, you probably will finish off most things. An additional few mortal wounds coming through is helpful. I suppose if you split your attacks as well, you might see some use. Demon Primarch must be Warlord if someone else has the same rule. Mortarion, either one. 6 inch, and I feel that's contentious at best, because I don't think either one of them would be happy with that, or being in the same field as each other. 6 inch aura, giving reroll hit rolls of 1 to 1000 Suns core units, and then in command phase select 1000 Suns core or character, and they can reroll all hits. 4 up invul and can never peril. Gaze of Magnus, smite inflicts d6 mortal wounds or 3d3 if you cast 11 plus. Can reroll psychic test and add 1 psychic test or deny, and if 10 wounds or more, add +2. Interesting. I don't know if, I don't think he gets the ability to get +1 I mentioned before, which was you get +1 to your cast for being part of the Brotherhood of Sorcerers, and I don't see he has the rule there, so I guess no, he doesn't get an additional +1, but +2 and +1 is still very, very helpful on that side as well. No smite and 3 powers, cast 3 and denies 3, though if he is your warlord and he's got the warlord traits, then he's going to know every spell, which is crazy. Warlord Traits, reroll deny test can be, here's the Warlord Traits. Reroll deny test can benefit for additional Cabal Ritual, -1 damage to minimum of 1, knows all spells he has access to, which is 18 spells in total. So is he worth 450 points? I mean, if he doesn't get shot, he'll be worth 450 points, but again, he's a big model, not toughness 8, 4 up invul, can't prove it. I suppose you can make him -1 to hit, he's -1 damage. He can recover wounds quite easily through spells and other stratagems, etc., or abilities. I think I read strategy of trying to keep him in tactical reserves and coming in from board edge. That might be quite expensive though. I don't know. 450 points, I can certainly see use for him, but I still see plenty of ways that if you know he's coming, then you might actually just be able to punk him off the field quite early. Great though, I do love seeing Magnus. I don't know whether I'm blinded by nostalgia on love for my Demon Primarchs, than I think he is as good as he is. But expensive investment, cool model, good abilities. Yeah, I like him. Is he as good as people think? Let me know. And that is it for my first impressions of Thousand Suns. Anything I didn't cover, please put in the comments and I'll try and get back to them. What are my thoughts? Ultimately, Thousand Suns' problems were some of the rules were not as good. They've done a good job, I think, tidying them up, but it's the model range. The model range needs to be expanded to give them an increased toolkit that they can get some options for, and I think it would do them the world of good. Some more better supporting characters would be nice. You know, the Infernal Master's fine, but maybe one that allowed reroll wound rolls of 1, etc, etc. Like Lieutenant is useful. It's maybe a little bit go-to, but it is useful. The other one I always say is that they should introduce some of the Forge World units from 30k to 40k for Thousand Suns. They've got a Psychic Contemptor Dreadnought, which would be excellent. I don't think you can currently use that for Thousand Suns, but it'd be excellent if you could. If you can, let me know and I'll buy one immediately. The Prospering Kopesh, which I think the troops in 30k can dual wield. I think they would be really good if you could put them on Rubric Marines, make them a combat unit rather than just ranged. I think that would be really good, especially with 2 attacks. You'd maybe see them become a much more combat powerhouse. And then there's some automata as well for them, which would be much more in line with Thousand Suns. I know they're more strayed away from automata as they have moved up in 4K, but I think it would be really good to have them to feel a bit more like Thousand Suns. I don't know, maybe they've abandoned them all, I don't think they have, but I think it would be really, really useful. I don't like the Custodians sort of use Forge World to buff up the army. I didn't think it was completely ideal, but it's better than nothing, and I think in Thousand Suns' case, that is the case. So thanks again for watching. Please comment, share, like and subscribe. Any questions, put them in the comments. Check us out on social media. I'm trying to finish up as much projects as I can. I'm almost finished a few of them. I'm hoping to start some different units, get away from Ashes Militarum because I've painted so many. And we'll see you on our Tabletop Assault Battle Reports.